Okay. Welcome to my live stream that is entitled The Symptom of Isolation in a Global Pandemic. Wow. I'm going to start off by defining some terms. I'm going to define isolation and I'm going to define symptom. And I don't feel like I need to define global pandemic. And isolation is a symptom of borderline personality disorder. And then I'm going to talk about, well, actually, it's going to probably make more sense if I don't disclose. Okay. So, what is a symptom? A symptom, there are a few definitions. I'll start with the one that I don't really care for. Subjective evidence of disease or physical disturbance, broadly. Something that indicates the presence of bodily disorder. So, okay, the stuff that makes up borderline personality disorder, the behaviors and such, would be the symptoms of borderline personality disorder in particular. But another definition says something that indicates the existence of something else, i.e. symptoms of an inner turmoil. A slight indication, trace. That I will be getting into later. So there are these distinctions between symptom as evidence of a disorder and symptom as simply evidence of something else without a quality to it. Okay. And then isolation. So isolation is a symptom of borderline personality disorder, meaning, well, in my experience, if there's an experience of isolation, for example, I'll use it like an example from a movie. There's this movie where these children are left in the woods by themselves for a really long time. So boom, they're isolated. When they come out, they're very feral. And by that, like, I mean unsocialized, wild in their expression, etc. So in the context of borderline personality disorder, there's, in my experience, a trauma which causes isolation, which then triggers a fear of rejection or abandonment as a response, kind of like PTSD. And then it presents as extreme emotions or behavior, which then perpetuate more isolation. So it's a cycle, kind of, that perpetuates itself. And a cycle of experience, a cycle as a person. Yeah. So there's the helpful way to perceive of this, I would say helpful, productive maybe, when this sounds a little more violent, way to perceive of this like system of isolation. I'll say system instead of symptom because symptom, people think of it as the first definition where it's just indicating a disorder, but I want to open it up to it's something that happens that is referring to something else. So just the system. Wow, so many words. Okay. So there's basically, you can look at it as, yeah, the symptom or the system. When you look at it as a symptom, we're saying the person experiencing the symptoms is the problem. When you look at it as a system, we're saying, oh, this is a reference to another problem. If you look at an individual as a problem, I'll use my example that I love, which is like a glitch in a computer system versus bad data in a computer system, to take us away from thinking about people and their value, because that is a little difficult. That was a joke. In a computer system, you can have a glitch, which is an inability to process some data. That indicates that if the system were to need that data, that's a problem with that system. That inability to process that data, meaning it's not bad data, the system has a glitch. The glitch is the system, not the data. However, we confuse that concept with bad data, which is data that simply cannot be processed. Like, it's, for example, not written syntactically correct. Semantically? And I, from experience, believe that us humans, we can't possibly be bad data, because if we're here existing, we are data. Like, how can you live wrong? That doesn't make sense to me. So how I understand humanity is that every instance of injustice is because of the system that was unable to process it, not because of the individual, because usually a trauma from a system ignites an injustice. Okay, isolation is a symptom of borderline personality disorder. Okay, we're all over the place. Basically, since I'm looking at this borderline personality disorder article by National Institute of Mental Health, and they low-key said in the risk factors, well, they actually explicitly said, actually they wrote it wrong, so they didn't even say, but they said, but is it not clear whether these changes are risk factors for the disorder or caused by the disorder, period. But they meant to say, I assume, it is not clear whether these changes are risk factors for the disorder or caused by the disorder. Meaning, we don't know if isolation is a symptom or the system. Meaning, borderline personality disorder could basically just be a title for, we don't know how to process this bitch. Sorry. Okay. Politics of sustaining a system, and by system, I'll refer to capitalism, that perpetuates the violence of dismissing people as not processable, bad data, silencing their experience. Yes. Okay. It's, I think, starts with the separation of space. if it starts somewhere, that maybe it'll help if I look at myself talk. It starts with it starts with the separation of space, that we begin to separate people from ourselves. Yes. Once there's, I mean, I'm talking in extremes a little bit and exaggerating. However, the separation of space exaggerates, I'll say, our distance from people, which is already, there's a physical barrier, but our connectivity, like spiritually, I'll say. Because when somebody leaves, you can assume. I sound like a colicky child. That's okay. And then also that carries in how we talk, meaning we can talk in some spaces well of people and talk in other spaces badly of people, and have these really contorted perpetuations. Not even like image, like I'm sure we have like I'm not sure. We have a whole image of each other, but it's scattered by the separation of space. Yeah. And the way that we talk about people is kind of just a reflection of that. And also the way that we talk about ourselves is a reflection of that. Like the way that we need privacy is proof that the public isn't safe for authenticity, for expression. Okay. Okay. Interdependence versus codependence. I just want to just touch there because some people, interdependence. Oh, I forgot to pull it up for the proper definitions. Okay, interdependence is mutual dependence, symbiosis. All living things depend on their environment to supply them with what they need, including food, water, and shelter. This is known as interdependence. That's disgusting that somebody wrote that without also writing that we're depleting the earth. Just so you know. So that's not really interdependence. I'd say that's codependence. Yeah. Codependence is excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner, typically one who requires support on account of an illness or addiction. Interesting. This is very emotional to read and talk about. And justify. Okay, so codependence is, my example is humans depleting the earth, excessive reliance on the earth on account of addiction to money. Okay. Interdependence would be being dependent upon one another, so nurturing one another. So what we sometimes refer to as love and indicate as love, but we also call a lot of other stuff love. So that word is kind of interesting. I interdepend you. I don't love or codepend. I intend interdependence. Whatever. People think sometimes that people with borderline personality disorders, because they have extreme emotions, are simply incapable, meaning they're bad data, meaning they're not supposed to have or engage in a meaningful relationship. Like people think of themselves as individuals, but then the person experiences it as like a repeated thing. And in my experience, I keep hearing that I have nothing to offer, which is interesting considering how the people who say that also never even want anything from me in the first place. So that's interesting. But yeah, I interdepend you, meaning I have something to offer in return. Everything that I expect I offer in return, I guess. I don't want to say expect though. And then there's this ugly word, codependency. Like, obviously that exists and it occurs, but I think it's more like an illusion. Is that ugly to say? Let me think about this before I say it. No, people experience it and it happens, but what I mean to say is that it's a situation that's caused by the idea of bad data. If we addressed that there is no such human as bad data, then the phenomena of codependency would end. So the violence of having to justify one is worth relating to in their extremes. Yeah. What's interesting to me is I feel like people can always relate to me. So, it's just like, like maybe, yeah, to have interdependence with someone who's being erased is to erase yourself. So that's violent. I don't really want to talk anymore. So you can see the previous video that's about suicide prevention for more on basically what can one do about this so-called perpetuation of violence that I just pointed out. And yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Catch you later.